What's up guys, my name is Ace, and I know this won't come as a surprise to many people out there, but apparently Black Ops 6 is having some pretty big retention issues relative to previous years of Call of Duty. And I wanted to share the data on this, as well as just discuss why I feel this may be happening, as well as some potential solutions going forward to this. Now, this data was revealed through an article on thegamebusiness.com, however, the data itself is coming from Ampere Analytics, which after looking into them a little bit, it looks like this is the type of thing where they may not necessarily have the exact official data direct from Activision, but instead they use various tools to give the best estimation possible as far as what the player counts are. So I can't guarantee that these are 100% perfectly accurate, but they are quite a reputable company and analytics is what they do. So I would at least trust that they're in the rough ballpark for these values. And with this, they're sharing the monthly active users on Call of Duty in general, so this would include multiplayer as well as Warzone, but not mobile, that's handled separately, for the launch periods, as well as 4 months later in the following March after launch for Black Ops 6, Modern Warfare 3, and Modern Warfare 2. And with Modern Warfare 3, they didn't explicitly state that value, but they did say that it was 13 million less than Black Ops 6, so that's where I got that value from. And looking at this, while the total number of monthly active users, even at its lowest point, which was actually in March with Black Ops 6 at 20.6 million, that is still a ridiculously large number. Most game devs or studios would kill for 10% of that monthly active user value. So I would say Call of Duty isn't even remotely close to what you'd call dead. However, these values, if accurate, are lower than what we should be expecting with Black Ops 6, and you'll notice the retention relative to previous years is pretty bad. If we look at the retention percentage, so the percentage of players relative to the launch period 4 months later, with Modern Warfare 2, it was 71%. With Modern Warfare 3, it was apparently a little bit over 100%. So there are actually slightly more players playing 4 months later than players that were playing at launch with Modern Warfare 3. And then with Black Ops 6, it's just 61% according to these values. So while again, that's still a massive number and Call of Duty I'm sure is doing just fine, that probably is a lot less than what was anticipated with Black Ops 6, since it was confirmed that Black Ops 6 had the highest user count at launch out of any Call of Duty game ever, and that's at 33.7 million value. Now, one big key to point out here, and I suspect this is having a pretty big effect on these numbers, is this also includes Warzone, and this was from March, so before the launch of Verdansk, and I would argue probably Warzone's lowest point ever at that stage. So I suspect just on the Warzone side of things, that's probably at least a big contributor to this massive drop in retention. And I would be really curious to see what these numbers look like now, after Verdansk launched. I suspect that brought quite a few players back, and I bet these numbers are actually quite a bit higher now if we're looking at the overall big picture with Black Ops 6 as well as Warzone. Now, in saying that, I don't think that accounts for everything when we're talking about retention with Black Ops 6. I do think, based on my experiences playing the game, as well as being heavily involved in the community, and having my views and income pretty much directly tied to the current Call of Duty game, it really does feel like Black Ops 6 has seen a bigger drop in retention than what we're used to. Just comparing that to last year with Modern Warfare 3, while I didn't have the most amazing views for the launch of a Call of Duty game with that, I found those views were quite consistent throughout most of the year of Modern Warfare 3's lifecycle. And that aligns with this roughly 100% retention value. It seems like the people that did play it and enjoy it early on, they stuck with it throughout the year. Whereas with Black Ops 6, that hasn't been the case. There was a very strong launch window, lots of interest, lots of hype and excitement, and that did drop off quite sharply, I would say, after the holiday season. So let's talk about some of the potential reasons for this, mainly looking at big picture stuff. We're not going to dive too deep into the individual elements of Black Ops 6 in particular, like specific bugs that are taking place with the game or gameplay design or anything like that. This is more big picture, what I feel is going wrong here. And I'm going to be mirroring a lot of the things I talked about in a video I made back in January of this year, talking about how I feel Call of Duty's live service model is not being handled very well. I think that's obviously a huge part of this, is their live service just hasn't really been meeting expectations, especially this year with Black Ops 6, compared to last year with Modern Warfare 3, where their live service was incredible, and it looks like that was at least correlated to much higher retention values. And I honestly feel one of the biggest issues here with the retention with Black Ops 6, and one of the big reasons it lost so much of its great momentum that it had at launch, is simply the holiday lull. This is something that I feel the franchise needs to make adjustments to going forward, because this happens every year to varying degrees, but it was especially bad this year, I find, with Black Ops 6, where the game launched with really heavy praise. People really seemed to like Black Ops 6. There was a lot of very positive feedback coming out, and obviously there were some issues at launch and things that needed to get worked out, but people were generally having a good time. Things started to get better, and then the holiday season hit, and it was just like radio silence followed by delays to content drops, as well as delays to bug fixes, and we were suddenly just left for roughly a month with nothing. At least nothing really of value with the game. And during this period, this is where Black Ops 6 lost all of its momentum, and I found the community sentiment shifted pretty drastically at that point. The comments I would see online went from generally very positive comments or constructive feedback sort of things to immediately, this game is trash, this is the worst Call of Duty ever, I hate this game. And it's crazy to me looking back to see how quickly things shifted here from Black Ops 6 is a great Call of Duty to now Black Ops 6 is trash. And it's not like at that point anything necessarily got worse, I just think we were stuck with this holiday lull with very little new content or updates and fixes to keep us engaged throughout the holiday season, and I think this is where they lost a huge chunk of their player base, and many of them never returned. Now, when it comes to the solution to this, I doubt the solution is just make the devs work over the holidays. The devs deserve their holiday break as well, especially after a big crunch leading up to launch, so that's likely not the right call. Obviously, I don't know everything that goes on internally though. However, maybe just better pre-scheduling of content so there's a steady stream or a steady drip of content throughout the entire holiday season and even a little bit beyond, anticipating some potential delays. So that would at least keep people a bit more engaged and at least a bit distracted from the issues that aren't going to get worked out while most of the devs are on holiday. This is something where Modern Warfare 3 did a really good job with that. We had a steady stream of aftermarket parts, and I remember the holiday lull still happened with that game. There were some much needed fixes and improvements that we were just stuck waiting for until the devs got back from holiday, but in the meantime, we at least had some cool new things to play around with week after week. And I think that would have gone a long way with Black Ops 6. If we had a new weapon mod, for instance, every week throughout the holidays, it would have been at least a lot easier to stay engaged throughout that holiday lull as we waited for the major updates. Now this segues into my next point, and this is more the general content and post-launch support scheduling. This is another area where I think there is room for improvement for better, more consistent retention over time with Call of Duty. What I've found is content is often really inconsistent and too infrequent for consistent engagement week after week. And again, circling back to aftermarket parts in Modern Warfare 3, they did quite a good job with this, making sure there was always something to look forward to almost every single week. But then on top of that, events. They could be far more engaging than they have been with Black Ops 6. Their events have been quite lackluster. I rarely ever feel excited when a new event drops in Black Ops 6, and I think a big reason behind that is just how they handle the progression in those events, which is usually just continue playing the game and you'll complete the event. Then when it comes to seasonal content, I still find in Call of Duty in general, it's quite unpredictable as far as the quantity of content and the release schedule for that content. And I think it would help with retention if we knew exactly what to expect season after season, at least when it comes to the quantity of content. So just looking at 6v6 multiplayer, for instance, it would be nice to know that every single season we're going to be getting 2 6v6 maps at launch and then 2 mid-season, as well as 3 guns at launch with the season, and then maybe 2 more mid-season with weapon mods and maybe perks and kill streaks and stuff sprinkled in between those updates. Do we get that level of content some seasons? Yes, absolutely. However, you never know if you're going to get that same level of content support the next season, and I think consistency could go a long way with that. Next after that, another thing that I think has been harming retention overall with Call of Duty in recent years is the shift to the grind over gameplay mindset that many Call of Duty players have adopted over the years. For many players, all they really want to do when a new Call of Duty comes out is level up their guns, get the mastery camo, and then that's it. They beat the game essentially, and they're done with it, and they burn themselves out on it. And for many of these players, the grind takes precedence over enjoying the gameplay experience. And this is something that's been actively nurtured by the devs with their constant tiny map 24/7 playlists that we see now basically right at launch throughout the entire life cycle of games. Whereas previously, those used to be like special limited time events where you'd get it for a weekend or maybe a full week. And then outside of that, you've got to play the entire game if you want to continue your grind. You have to play on all of the maps and experience the entire game. And I think the big problem with offering these tiny map 24/7 playlists all the time is it has shifted to that grind over gameplay mentality since we have this extremely efficient way of grinding. So therefore, the players that are focused on the grind will stick to playing the same map over and over again for a month or two to get their camos and stuff unlocked. And then once they do that, they've effectively beaten the game when it comes to multiplayer. At least that's how a lot of people see it. And they've burnt themselves out on the game so hard because they've been playing the same tiny map and nothing else for a month or two straight. This isn't new to Call of Duty by any means. It has been happening over the past several years, but I feel like this definitely has contributed, at least with Black Ops 6, where I noticed a lot of people, they just played Stakeout 24/7 for the first couple months, they got their Dark Matter camo, and then they were just burnt out and they hated the game after that. And I think playing Stakeout 24/7 for months at a time would make most people hate the game. Now, when it comes to a solution to this, I really don't know what the solution is, because the cat's out of the bag on this one, and I don't think you can put it back in. I think if these games launched without these tiny map 24/7 playlists, or without offering that on a very regular basis, that could turn a bunch of players away that have now come to expect that, because to them, that's what Call of Duty is now. Now, perhaps they could put more emphasis on like 10v10 or even 12v12 on regular maps in the game, so players that are looking for more efficient ways to grind and for that crazy, chaotic gameplay, they would have the ability to have that level of gameplay on the regular maps and therefore experience way more variety with the game. But outside of that, I really don't know what the solution would be here. In either case, this leads me to the last general point here, again, focusing just on the big picture when it comes to player retention, and I'm sure this won't be too surprising to many. This is just the way they've been handling matchmaking and disbanding lobbies. I know I've been ragging on this for so many years at this stage, but I really think we're seeing a lot of that long-term burnout with the modern matchmaking system, at least within segments of the community. I realize it must be very effective with very large groups of the community, probably the majority, but I think a lot of the people that don't like the modern matchmaking system, they've kind of put up with it for years now, and they're really just starting to reach that long-term burnout, and they can't put up with it anymore. I noticed a ton of my longtime viewers have reached this stage where they had been hanging in there and sticking it out and still playing Call of Duty over these years, just hoping something would change, but they've given up hope at this point, and they just can't put up with it anymore. And I do think that's probably at least somewhat contributing to this. And then on top of that, I think disbanding lobbies has been a huge part of this as well, because with forced disbanding lobbies, the game has lost all sense of its in-game community, and especially when you combine that with the fact that the matchmaking system makes it very difficult to have an enjoyable experience playing with mixed skilled friends. I think they've really lost a huge part of that social element with Call of Duty, where it's less likely to be the place that you go to hang out with your friends online and play video games, because there are so many other games out there where mixed skilled friends can have way more fun together than they can in Call of Duty now. Now, obviously, I don't have the data on that. Perhaps this level of matchmaking and the disbanding lobbies is still a net positive overall to the general community, but I'm just sharing some of the observations I've been making. It does seem a lot of people have really just reached that burnout stage with the modern matchmaking and disbanding lobbies. And with that, that's where we're going to leave it for today's video. Those are the primary issues that I believe have been impacting retention. Obviously, it can't be ignored that Black Ops 6 has its own unique issues, and I'm sure many of the small individual issues, those add up as well and have been harming retention. But at the same time, every Call of Duty has its individual issues like this, so I don't think that really accounts as much for this loss of retention with Black Ops 6. Now, of course, these are all just my thoughts on this situation, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. First off, how are you guys feeling about those values? Were you guys surprised to see just how bad the retention appears to be for Black Ops 6? And second, what do you think are some of the biggest issues that are causing this loss of retention this time around? Also, if you're somebody that played Black Ops 6 early on and you no longer play it, please let me know exactly why in those comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.